Hello and welcome to Spencer's Library. I'm Claudia and these are the German books I am hoping to read in 2020. I am so excited to share this TBR with you because this is inspired by a reading challenge which is being hosted by two wonderful German booktubers, Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventures and Britta Böhler from Britta Böhler. I'll link their channels down below. Specifically, I'll link their announcement videos down below. And they have decided that they would quite like to read more German books in 2020. And Mel summed it up perfectly when she said that, especially as a German booktuber, you sometimes tend to just favor English language books because you know that they are going to be easier to talk about in an English language booktube context. And I'm the same. Every time I talk about a German book on my channel, I know that people are less likely to know the book, less likely to be interested in the book. But I do actually have a ton of German books on my TBR, and I think this is just the perfect opportunity for me to try and get stuck into them and read more books from my home country. So for those of you who don't know, I am originally from the Black Forest region of Germany, the most beautiful part of the world. I'll insert some pictures here that I took on a walk in my hometown only last year, yes, I think. It's an absolutely gorgeous part of the world and I miss it every day. I am currently living in Wales in the UK, another beautiful part of the world, by the way, but I am going to move back, so that is happy news for me. But bad news for my TBR, because it means that this year I'm really hoping to get through those books that I have been hoarding on the shelf behind me. And today I've picked out the 12 books from that TBR that are German. Actually, that's 12 books on the TBR and one book that I'm currently reading. Now, I love the way that this reading challenge is set up because Mel and Britta have come up with a system of levels. So depending on how many books you get through that are originally in the language of German, you get to different levels. And if I manage to read all 13 German books, then I am going to achieve level 3, Zugspitze, which is the tallest mountain in Germany. Let's see if I get there. The first book, I say the first book, these are not ordered in any particular way. The first book that is on the top of the pile is Frank Schätzing's Der Schwarm. Oh, I should have really looked up what these books are called in English, but I will put the English translated titles in the description box where there are English translations of these books. I picked this up actually in a UK charity shop. As you can see, it cost me £2. And I picked it up because I remember this being released. I was in high school when this was released and everyone was reading it. This is one of those incredibly hyped books of its time. Yes, so this was released in 2005, so I would have been 14 then. And I believe it's a thriller. It is a huge book and thrillers aren't necessarily my favorite genre, especially contemporary thrillers are not generally my pick, but sometimes I really crave a thriller. Sometimes I really want something that sucks you in on a very emotional level because, you know, once you start a good thriller, you just kind of can't stop with it. And I'm going to save this for a moment when I feel like that. Most often I feel like that actually when I'm in a reading slump. A thriller is a good book to get me out of a reading slump. I know absolutely nothing about the plot of this, so apologies if you came here to learn more about this book, because all I know is that it was very popular and a lot of people liked it when I was 14. This one, we're really like, this is going to be a pure nostalgic TBR, at least here at the beginning. this is one that I did read around the time when I was 14, and this is Andreas Steinhöfel's Die Mitte der Welt. And this is a beautiful young adult contemporary coming-of-age story. This was released in 1998, but I definitely read it much later. I had a copy of this that I believe I borrowed from the school library or possibly from the public library, but I never owned my own copy. So when I saw this in a second-hand book in my hometown in Germany for 50 cents, I had to pick it up. And it's been a while since I last read it. All I remember was that the main character is, I think, 16 or 17 years old, and, you know, it's about his life. But it's just a really beautiful story. I'm pretty certain that this has been translated. Again, this was a really big success in Germany when it came out, and I will link it in the description box. And I can imagine picking this up near the springtime. I always feel like reading a good coming-of-age story in the springtime, and I think this is going to be my pick for this year. I've just realised that I have 12 books, so one for each month of the year. Next up is a book that I've spoken about in my recent Classics TBR video, and that is Das kunstseidene Mädchen by Irmgard, Keun. This is an early 20th century German classic and an author that I have long been interested in but never actually have picked any of her books up. And when I went to Germany last year, I saw this in the bookshop. And I had to get it. I very rarely buy new books, but I had to get this one. And this is often described as a early 20th century German feminist classic. And just glancing at the back, it seems to be about the life of a secretary in Berlin. Interesting. I tend to read more German contemporary novels than German classics, which is interesting because with my English language reading, I much prefer classics to contemporary novels. But I think partly that is because I am not so familiar with German classics beyond what is taught in school. So maybe after I've gone through this, my next mission will be to discover more German classics, especially 20th century classics. Because there really isn't a whole lot that I have read when it comes to German 20th century classics. Any recommendations, as always, post them in the comments. Next up, I had to get this as well when I went to Germany, is Birgit Hermann's Die Glasmacherin. And this is, I mean, you can tell by the cover, this is set in the Black Forest. The genre of historical crime fiction is huge in Germany. You go in a bookshop and there is so many of these types of novels. Mysteries set in the past, in the local area. And similar to thrillers, they're not my favourite genre, but they are a genre that I just crave occasionally. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to pick this one up very, very soon, because just reading a book that's set in the same part of the world where you're from is so comforting when you live in a different country. And this is set in 19th century Black Forest. It doesn't say where specifically in the Black Forest. Maybe it is a fictionalized place, maybe it's not set in a real place, but I am very, very intrigued by it. It says in the on the blurb that the author is originally from Titisee, which is a place in the Black Forest that is endlessly amusing to English speakers. Now this one, I have to say I'm slightly less excited about. This is Altes Land by Dörte Hansen, and my mum sent me this because I asked her to please send me some German books, and she went into the local bookshop and they suggested this to her. I've heard some mixed reviews about this book. This is a German contemporary novel that deals with generational past. First of all, I'm not that keen on this genre of kind of literary contemporary German fiction. I often find it's more effort than it's worth to read that. And you might not understand this if you've only ever read English language literary fiction. But the levels of pretensions and overcomplicating the art of storytelling go up by a million as soon as you look at what is published in Germany. So I'm not sure if I will enjoy this a whole lot, but I'll give it a good try. And one of my resolutions for this year is to DNF books if I don't like them. So I know I'm not going to be forcing my way through this, and you never know, it might surprise me. Then, this is Gehen, ging, gegangen by Jenny Erpenbeck, a book that I picked up, I think last year or 2 years ago while in Germany. And the author is a favourite of Mel. However, she, if I remember correctly, I know this whole video sounds like I'm just basically stalking Mel on Instagram, and honestly that's what I do. But I believe that she posted on her Instagram that she wasn't actually that keen on this particular book. But this is the first book that I've read by this author, and I'm going to give it a good go. Apparently it deals with immigrant culture in Germany, which is very near and dear to my heart since both of my parents are immigrants. Ooh, now we're diving back into nostalgic memories of reading as a child. This is Die Zauberschule by Ende. It is a collection of short stories by this author, and every child growing up in Germany of a certain age will remember reading Michael Ende's various lovely novels. I read them myself as a child. I read them to children I was babysitting in Germany, but I have never actually read his short stories. Although looking at the index of stories, there is one story called Das Traumfresserchen, which I'm pretty sure I have read, although I may have been 5 when I read it. Very, very looking forward to reading this, even though I'm not normally a fan of short stories, but I can imagine having this as a bedtime read, reading one story a night. Just like when I was a child. Lovely. The next book is a historic novel that I picked up last time I went to Germany. And this is Meister der Täuschung by Sabine Ebert, which is the first part in, I believe, a 4-part series set in 12th century Germany. Even though the cover looks kind of fantasy-ish, I believe that this is a straight historic novel without any fantasy elements. But again, I might be surprised. And when I went to the local bookshop in my hometown last time I visited Germany, I found a lot of books that intrigued me, and I posted some of them on Instagram, and I got a lot of recommendations for this particular series. So that's the one I went for, and I just opened this up, and it has a very complicated family tree here of the various royal houses of medieval Germany. So that will be very interesting to get stuck into. Again, I'm super intrigued by this. I think I'll pick this one up sooner rather than later. Then another one that I spoke about in my classics TBR. This is a collection of Bertold Brecht's poems, and I don't have great hopes for this one because if you're at all familiar with this channel, you know poetry is just not my thing. But I do appreciate Bertolt Brecht's stories. I read a lot of his short stories and plays in school, and I'll give this a good go. Poetry has defeated me every single time so far, but this might just be the one. Next up are 2 books that were actually gifted to me by the wonderful Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventure. This one is Lila Lila by Martin Suter, and this one is Die schärfsten Gerichte der tatarischen Küche by Alina Bronsky. Mel really raves about this one. I am so excited about this. It's kind of a fun contemporary tale, from what I understand, that deals with issues of immigration, contemporary politics, families, and I don't really know what this one is about. Okay, it seems like a psycho thriller. I might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, Mel, but this looks absolutely terrifying just based on the back. Very, very excited about these two. Oh, I should stop saying that. Like, honestly, I'm excited about all of these books, otherwise they wouldn't be on my TBR. Then we get to the last book on my TBR, and this is actually set in my hometown. And this is Das Keltenritual by Christoph Weiglein. Do I know him? I don't think I know him. I'm sure I know someone with his surname. And this is a contemporary crime mystery that features the oldest monument in my hometown, which is an old Celtic gravesite. Although today it is literally just a hill. You couldn't even tell that it's an old Celtic burial site. But that is the setting for this particular story. Now, I recently read another crime novel that's set in my hometown. I can't remember the name of it. And I loved reading about the town I grew up in. I come from a relatively small town, and you just know all of the places. You know all of the shops that I mentioned, the schools that I mentioned, the churches, even some characters where you're pretty sure you know which local politician or local journalist they are inspired by. And that's what I'm super excited about when I'm going to read this novel as well. Finally, let me tell you about the book that I'm currently reading, and it is a German classic by Thomas Mann, Der Zauberberg, The Magic Mountain, and this I am reading as part of a read-along hosted by Andreas from Infinite Text and myself. There is a Goodreads group which I'll link to down below. I am terribly behind in this, but I have the feeling that everyone else is as well. It is a rather dense book, it is rather difficult, but I don't want to DNF it because there is something about it that keeps me going. There is something intriguing about this. It's certainly not the plot because there isn't much of it, but I think it's the characters in a monologue, the way that they think about the world is quite intriguing to me. So I'm going to keep going with this one as well. So let's see if I will manage to climb the Zugspitze in this reading challenge. I'm so grateful for Mel and Britta for creating this and for giving me a kick up the arse to get through my German books before I move back to Germany and inevitably buy more German books there. Let me know if you're going to be joining in, and if so, what books are on your TBR. Let me know if you have any particular recommendations or warnings, as usual, about the TBR that I've presented to you today. And check the description box for more details about those books. Thank you for watching. Bye!